welcome back. It's Christina again with the Artist Pod, and today we're going to talk about how to draw an English Bulldog. So, let's get arting. Alright, here is the English Bulldog. They're pretty cute. Their colors can vary wildly between, English Bulldog to English Bulldog. So this one's going to have some white and tan, and we're just going to start by the nose. Just like all animals, as you layer up the strokes, you do a stroke, and then one in between, and we're just following the contour. There's also an edge here because they're so wrinkly. So there'll be, a gap where we push the lines up to the edge and then stop it and then pick up the same lines beyond that. So it'll create the illusion that there's a gap, and then highlights and shadows will help finish that illusion off. So anytime, you can kind of see it over here, right? Like when I take this off, you can see the wrinkles in his skin. So the way I'm doing that is as I come to an edge of a hump, I'm like humping it down, but then off the edge of a different one, I'm looping it kind of under. So I'll loop these strokes under and these strokes up, and that'll create the illusion that there's wrinkles in the skin even before we add the shadows and the highlights. It just, it takes a little bit more effort on this step. It takes longer to do because I got to put a little more effort into making sure that makes sense, but it can be an effective way to see it, and potentially will help once we start adding the shadows and highlights as well. Alright, so I'm going to have the light source coming from above and to the right. Like always, that means above and in front of, not behind or next to. And we're just going to get started, and that's with full pin pressure. Right, just coming in here, full pin pressure, and really laying out these lines, following the contour of the lines we've already drawn. And all edges are in shadow, so he's got a little bit of a ridge on the nose here before it kind of connects into the rest of it. So this edge would be in shadow until it gets down to the point where you'd be able to see it all runs together. And then of course underneath is always in shadow as well. Obviously this is, it's turning away from the light source. So at this point it would come down as well. It would, you would use less pin pressure to indicate it's going back into shadow down here. Now onto this other side where a lot of this is going to be in shadow as it comes down, but it's going to have highlight into the top. So what I'm going to do is draw a lot of this in shadow first, even though it's going to have a lot of highlight, and then taper it over. Now some of this, again, the edge is in shadow, so this edge at the top is still going to be in shadow because there is kind of the separation between their nose, almost like a wrinkle there, and then some of this is definitively in highlight, so I'm going to pull that over. But with the less pin pressure, you know, once I get over here, I can really sort of sort out where I think that transition would change and sort of taper it over. So that it makes sense. And until then, I'll just do put less pen pressure in order to denote the shadow. And they're likely, you know, just like on most animals' cheeks, their noses aren't big enough to block the light. Same is true for this guy. It's just because of the different shape, there'd be more of a shadow kicking in on this side than typically on an animal's cheeks, because he's got his big floppy cheeks. Now, especially some of this side would have it, you figure, light source coming in from over here, and this is sort of rounding, right? So some of this would definitely be picking up some of this light before it kind of gets to the other side. And I'm not putting full pen pressure here, I'm actually just adding more strokes. So I've already layered it up, so there's no need for me to put a lot of pressure. So with all their wrinkles, one of the things I did is came in here and I'm still doing it because I just realized I missed the spot. And I'm trying to indicate the wrinkles by putting shadows at where I sort of denoted already where the base of a wrinkle was, right? So where a wrinkle's sinking in, it's going to be in that just that little bit of shadow, and when it's bulging up, you're going to have some highlights. So it just needs to have some shadowing. And so I've already drawn that in. That's going to be easier for me to denote. I won't have to worry about it now. I just won't fully put pen pressure in where I see I've already drawn. And then that should indicate where, you know, shadows and highlights are, and thus where the wrinkles are. We may have to do some adjusting after, but for now, this should work. So I'm just going to temper these off, otherwise I think it works. Probably going to temper that off a bit more once we get the brown in, but for now I think that works. Just like with the left side, I'm going to put all of this into shadow first. It's going to be a lot of shadowing down in here, but there will also be some highlights, so I'm just going to have to sort of sort that out, and it's going to be easier. Put the whole thing in shadow and then sort out what's what. You have this coming down that's likely flapping over a bit. So there's going to be some shadowing over here as a result of the flap over here. It's going to be rounding this way, so there'll be shadowing on this side as that rounding takes place, but there should be, this section here is a solid spot of nothing blocking it, so right through here should be a lot of highlight. But as it rounds under, it's going to go back into shadow, and then you're going to have all the wrinkles, potentially some bursts of highlights on the wrinkles themselves. We just need to make sure that we fade the highlight on the chin out as it comes down. And as it comes over, tapering that out so that, you know, it's getting some shadow from over here. Giving this a little burst potentially under here. And I'm only giving this a little bit, but it's not going to be really in a lot of highlight. All right, and then over here, I'm going to taper this down. As it rounds, it's going to be rounding here into this shadow, so we're already hitting some of that now. Just like on the other side, I am going to give this a little bit of a burst to indicate some wrinkling, but quickly fade that off. Now we'll move to this brown color. Just like I did with the white, I'm going to come up here and put some shadows in place in the ridges of his wrinkles. And just like always, underneath the eye, right, the eyes round down into the face, so this would be in shadow on this side. And then highlight underneath, and on this side, light source coming from here. If it were a different angle, that might change, but based on its angle. And then of course all edges are in shadow, so this edge would be in shadow, even though that's the side of the light source. Alright, now the shadows over here, you know, they're pretty extreme, so just like we did with the white, I'm going to taper off some of this. It's looking nice and wrinkly. Now on this side, he's already in shadow, but we will be, you know, adding some extra highlights likely in between just to give the illusion of wrinkles, and up on the forehead that would be in highlight. So still gonna finish it off like I did before. Now under, you know, this section here, there's going to be some white, but right, otherwise their ears are flopping over. It looks a little weird because of the black, but once the white's in place, it won't look as strange. So on this side, right, light source coming in from over here, so this flap catches it, but on this side, the flap itself is going to be in shadow. What's going to catch the light is this little, has like a little section that's turned a bit, and that'll likely catch the light on this side. Alright, so I've turned this blackish grayish color into sort of a reddish gray. There, the black that's right here I think is more skin than it is fur. I could be wrong on that, but it's not the first time I've seen that on animals. Sometimes boxers will have that, and I believe that's what it is. So sometimes you can see some of the pinkish, so because of that I've just I've made this a reddish gray. Alright, so now we have the eyes. Their eyes actually have a lot of white around them, so we haven't done that in an animal, I don't think, in a long time. Alright, with the light source coming in from above and to the right, We're first going to have a burst of light against the pupil on this side. And then we're going to have light coming in from the side of the light source and going all the way underneath, right? So it's going to connect in to this burst of light against the pupil underneath, and then over here it's going to go into shadow. I opted to fill in the entire eye because there's the white that's pushing up. So we'll just dictate, you know, the shadow like we always do, where I'll back off the pin pressure. While I like having the dramatic look of, you know, the black up top, sometimes I'll fill it all the way in and then just really taper off the highlights and shadows up here where there's going to be shadowing. Usually with birds because there's so much space around their eyes, but in this case I'll do it with the dog. Right up against the pupil here there's going to be some shadowing, right? So it's a circular recess in our eye, so we have this side catching the light as it's popping out of shadow, and this side not catching the light but in shadow because it's going in with the light source over here. So that would change depending on where your light source is. And then of course the edge is also in shadow, this edge here. Alright, now that we've done the brown, we're going to do this bit of white, following that same kind of guideline, right? So we have, you know, the shadowing that's kicking in over here, and then the edge would be going into shadow, but under here you're going to have some highlighting, making sure that the edge of the iris is dark. And the same thing on this side, except a lot of this back side's going to be in shadow, right, just like it is over here. Alright, and then the last thing is adding in the light flare, which is one of the most important parts of an eye. So I just take the round select tool and I select it within the highlighted section on the side of the light source. I always start with the eye that's going to be a little bit more in shadow, and I'm just going to fill it with the foreground color, which I've already changed to white. And then the same thing on this side. Alright, so that is how you draw an English Bulldog. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.